She warned them not to begin the exorcism. The warning was not dramatic. It was not screamed or whispered in some theatrical voice. According to the nurse who was present, it was spoken calmly, almost politely, as if offering advice to people who did not yet understand the consequences of their next decision. "If you start," the woman said, staring at the wall behind them, "you will not be allowed to stop." The room went quiet after that. No one replied. The priest closed his prayer book, without meaning to. The recorder on the table continued to run, its red light steady, capturing the silence that followed. Church records would later note that this sentence was spoken at 7:42 p.m., approximately 12 minutes before the formal rite was scheduled to begin. That sentence would be referenced repeatedly in the months that followed. The woman's name was never released publicly. In the diocesan files, she is referred to only as Subject A. She was 34 years old, a school administrator by profession, married, no criminal history, no known psychiatric diagnosis beyond mild anxiety. She had been raised in the church, but was not particularly devout. Friends described her as practical, skeptical, and deeply private. Nothing in her background suggested she would become the center of one of the most controversial exorcism cases the diocese had faced in decades. The first signs were small. According to her husband's statement, the earliest changes appeared as sleep disturbances. She began waking at precisely 3:12 a.m. every night, not in panic, but alert, sitting upright in bed as if listening to something he could not hear. When he asked what was wrong, she would respond after a delay, saying she had been dreaming, though she could never describe the dream. After 2 weeks, she stopped answering altogether. She would wake, sit up, and stare toward the bedroom door until the time passed, then lie back down and resume sleeping as if nothing had happened. Medical explanations came first, as they always do. A family physician suggested stress. A sleep specialist mentioned circadian rhythm disruption. Medication was prescribed, then changed, then discontinued when it made no difference. Her sleep studies showed nothing abnormal except for one note written by a technician in the margin of a chart. Patient appears awake before EEG registers arousal. That note was dismissed as a calibration error. The second change involved language. Not foreign languages in the dramatic sense. Not unknown tongues. Just words used incorrectly. Subtle shifts. She would replace common phrases with older, more formal constructions. She referred to the refrigerator as an icebox. She called the hallway a passage. When corrected, she looked confused, not offended, as if the other person was mistaken. Her husband initially found this amusing, then unsettling. One evening, while preparing dinner, she asked him to move a chair away from the table. "It dislikes being crowded," she said. He asked who she meant. She blinked, as if surprised by the question, and said she was talking about the cat. They did not own a cat. Psychological evaluation followed. The clinician's report described her as cooperative, oriented, and coherent. No hallucinations were reported. No delusions expressed. Mood within normal limits. Insight intact. At the end of the report, however, another note appeared. Patient exhibits prolonged eye contact beyond normative range. Affect remains neutral during discussion of distressing topics. By the 3rd month, the house began to change. This is not metaphorical. Witnesses would later confirm physical alterations to the environment that could not be easily explained. Doors left open that had been closed. Objects moved slightly from their original positions. The smoke detector in the hallway triggered repeatedly at night despite no smoke, no fire, no malfunction detected by technicians. At 3:12 a.m., without fail, the husband began sleeping in the living room. He later stated that this was not out of fear, but practicality. "It felt like the bedroom wasn't ours anymore," he said. "Like we were intruding." During this time, Subject A remained functional. She continued working. She attended social events. She smiled when appropriate. She laughed at jokes, though sometimes a second too late. No one outside the household noticed anything seriously wrong, until the incident at the school. According to multiple witnesses, Subject A was conducting a routine staff meeting when she stopped speaking mid-sentence. She stood still for nearly 20 seconds, eyes unfocused, mouth slightly open. Several staff members asked if she was all right. When she resumed speaking, her voice was lower, not hoarse, not strained, simply lower, as if she had dropped into a different register. "There are places," she said, "that should not be named aloud." The room went silent. Someone laughed nervously, assuming it was a joke. Subject A looked at them with what one witness later described as pure confusion, like she didn't know why they were laughing. The meeting ended early. She took the rest of the day off. That evening, she told her husband she was afraid to be alone. This was the first time she admitted fear. She said there were moments when she felt overlapped, as if someone else was standing in the same space, just slightly out of alignment. She said it felt crowded inside her head. She said she sometimes lost time, not hours, but seconds, small slips that left her disoriented. When he suggested returning to the doctor, she agreed immediately. The neurological tests came back normal. The MRI showed no lesions, no abnormalities. Blood work was unremarkable. Toxicology screens were negative. The neurologist noted mild dissociation but could not determine a cause. During one appointment, while the doctor was speaking, Subject A interrupted him. "You should not be asking these questions," she said calmly. The doctor paused, then gently reminded her that she had come seeking help. She frowned, as if reconsidering something, and apologized. "I don't know why I said that," she added. The doctor later stated that during this exchange, her pupils appeared to constrict rapidly, then return to normal. He did not record this observation at the time, assuming it was his imagination. The first religious intervention was not an exorcism. It was a blessing. Subject A's mother contacted a local priest she had known for years. The priest agreed to visit the home, framing his involvement as pastoral support rather than spiritual warfare. He later admitted that he did not believe the situation warranted anything more serious. The blessing lasted less than 10 minutes. According to the priest's statement, Subject A was polite and attentive. She knelt when instructed. She responded appropriately to prayers. There were no outward signs of distress. Then, as he raised his hand to bless the house, she looked up at him. "You should leave," she said. The priest hesitated, unsure how to respond. "This place is not prepared," she continued. "You are not prepared." Her tone was not threatening. It was instructional. The priest finished the prayer quickly and left. He did not return. 2 days later, Subject A was found standing in the backyard at night, barefoot, despite freezing temperatures. She was facing the tree line, arms relaxed at her sides. Her husband called her name repeatedly before she turned around. When asked what she was doing, she replied, "Listening." Listening to what, he asked. "To the distance," she said. That night, for the first time, she spoke while asleep. Her husband recorded it on his phone, unsure what else to do. The recording captured her voice, flat and steady, reciting what sounded like a list. Names, perhaps, or places. The cadence was precise, rhythmic, as if memorized. When he played it back for her the next morning, she became visibly distressed. "That's not me," she said. The diocese became involved after the second priest refused to visit. The referral was cautious. The language used in the request emphasized discernment, psychological evaluation, and adherence to protocol. No one wanted to label the situation prematurely. The attending priest assigned to the case had 20 years of experience. He was known for his skepticism and restraint. According to colleagues, he had declined more exorcism requests than he had approved. He met Subject A for the first time in a neutral setting, accompanied by a licensed psychologist and a medical consultant. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. In his report, the priest noted that Subject A demonstrated awareness of religious concepts without aversion. She did not react negatively to sacred objects. She did not exhibit hostility or aggression. Her demeanor was calm, measured, almost detached. However, he also noted something else. At several points, he wrote, she appeared to anticipate questions before they were asked. Responses were delivered with unusual certainty, as if rehearsed. At the end of the meeting, he asked her directly if she believed she was being influenced by something external. She considered the question for a long time. "I believe," she said carefully, "that something is using me as a place to stand." The psychologist requested clarification. Subject A shook her head. "I don't have better words," she said. "It doesn't belong here, but it knows how to behave." The priest recommended continued observation. That recommendation would be revisited after the incident in the chapel. As part of the discernment process, Subject A was invited to sit quietly in a small chapel while the priest prayed silently. This was not an exorcism. No rite was performed. No commands were given. According to the security footage, Subject A entered the chapel at 6:18 p.m. She sat in the second pew from the back. She remained still for approximately 7 minutes. Then she stood. She walked to the center aisle and stopped beneath the crucifix. She tilted her head slightly, as if examining it from a new angle. The priest later stated that he felt a sudden pressure in his chest at that moment, though he did not yet interpret it as anything unusual. Subject A spoke without raising her voice. "This is not a suitable space," she said. The priest opened his eyes. She turned to face him. "There are agreements you do not remember making," she continued. "There are doors that do not require permission." The psychologist intervened, addressing her by name and asking her to sit down. She complied immediately. She returned to the pew and folded her hands in her lap. The session ended early. That night, the priest reviewed the footage alone. He paused it several times. He rewound and replayed a specific moment when Subject A stood beneath the crucifix. For a fraction of a second, her shadow appeared to stretch in a way that did not match her movement. He dismissed this as a camera distortion. The recommendation for a formal exorcism was not made lightly. It followed weeks of documentation, consultation, and internal debate. The bishop's approval was obtained with conditions. Medical personnel were required to be present. Psychological oversight was mandated. The rite would be conducted privately, without publicity. Subject A was informed of the decision. She listened without interruption. When the priest finished explaining, she nodded once. "You should not begin," she said. This was the moment that would later be referenced again and again. The priest asked her why. She did not answer immediately. She looked past him, toward the corner of the room, as if considering something unseen. "Because it is settled here," she said. "Because it has already learned the sound of your prayers." The psychologist suggested postponement. Subject A shook her head. "It won't matter," she said. "But if you start, you cannot stop halfway." The room fell silent. Despite the warning, preparations continued. According to protocol, the exorcism was scheduled for the following evening in a secured room within a church-owned facility. Recording equipment was set up. Medical staff reviewed emergency procedures. The priest fasted and prayed in isolation. Subject A arrived accompanied by her husband and a nurse. She appeared calm. Her vitals were stable. She consented to the procedure in writing. As she was seated and restrained lightly for safety, she looked at the priest one last time. Her expression was not fearful. It was almost apologetic. The recorder was switched on, and just before the priest began the opening prayer, Subject A spoke again, softly, clearly, with no change in her voice. "It knows you by name," she said. The priest hesitated. Then he opened the book, and in the moment before the first word was spoken aloud, the lights in the room dimmed, not suddenly, but gradually, as if someone unseen were slowly turning a dial, and the nurse noticed that Subject A was smiling, not at anyone in the room, but at the door behind them, where no one was standing. The priest began the opening prayer in a low, steady voice. According to the audio recording, the first words were spoken at 8:03 p.m. The cadence was deliberate, practiced. He did not rush. He did not pause. He later stated that he felt an unusual pressure in his ears, similar to changes in altitude, but he continued without interruption. Subject A's smile faded as the prayer continued. At first, there was no resistance. Her breathing remained even. Her posture did not change. The restraints were loose, precautionary rather than necessary. The nurse monitored her pulse and oxygen levels, both of which remained within normal limits. The psychologist observed silently from the corner of the room, notebook in hand. When the priest invoked the first formal command, instructing anything not of God to make itself known, Subject A closed her eyes. Her lips moved slightly. The recorder captured a whisper, barely audible, overlapping the priest's words. At the time, no one noticed it. It would only be identified later during a frame-by-frame audio analysis. It was not a prayer. It sounded like counting. The priest continued, his voice unwavering. He introduced sacred names, each spoken clearly, each followed by a brief pause. He later explained that he felt compelled to slow down, though he could not articulate why. At 8:11 p.m., Subject A's heart rate increased sharply. The nurse adjusted her position and asked if she was in pain. Subject A did not respond. Her jaw tightened, then relaxed. Her eyes remained closed. The psychologist noted a change in muscle tension along her neck and shoulders, subtle but visible. When the priest commanded the presence to identify itself, Subject A laughed. It was a single brief sound. Not loud, not hysterical, almost conversational. "That is not how this works," she said. The priest did not respond to the statement directly. He raised his voice slightly and repeated the command, this time invoking authority rather than invitation. Subject A's head tilted back. Her eyes opened. Witnesses later struggled to describe the change. There was no dramatic transformation, no contortion, no sudden violence. But everyone in the room reported the same sensation, the feeling that the person looking at them was no longer the one who had entered the room. Her gaze moved deliberately, settling on each individual in turn. When it reached the nurse, Subject A smiled faintly. "You should step back," she said. The nurse hesitated, then complied. The priest later stated that this moment marked a shift in the atmosphere of the room. He described it as a density, as if the air itself had become resistant to movement. The prayers continued. At 8:17 p.m., Subject A began to speak over the priest, not shouting, but matching his volume, weaving her voice between his words with unsettling precision. She spoke in English. "You are repeating sounds," she said. "You do not know what they open." The psychologist attempted to interrupt, reminding her of the setting, grounding her in the present. Subject A turned her head slowly toward him. "This is not for you," she said. "You are not involved." The psychologist later stated that he felt an immediate, overwhelming urge to leave the room. He described it as instinctual, not emotional. He remained seated only because he recognized the response as abnormal. The priest raised the crucifix and continued. Subject A's breathing became irregular. Her chest rose sharply, then held, as if she were inhaling more than her lungs could accommodate. The nurse noted a brief drop in oxygen saturation, followed by a sudden spike. At 8:24 p.m., Subject A spoke again. "If you proceed," she said, "there will be injury." The priest did not ask to whom. He continued. The first physical disturbance occurred moments later. The recorder picked up a low-frequency sound, similar to vibration, that was not audible to those in the room at the time. The table lamp nearest the wall flickered once, then stabilized. No power fluctuation was detected elsewhere in the building. Subject A's restraints tightened as her muscles tensed. Her hands clenched, then relaxed. She did not struggle. She laughed again. "That is not my name," she said suddenly. The priest paused. He later admitted that he had not spoken a name aloud. He had only thought it. The pause lasted approximately 3 seconds. Subject A used that time. "You should not think so loudly," she said. The priest resumed immediately, his voice louder now, more forceful. He commanded the presence to depart, invoking expulsion rather than dialogue. Subject A screamed. The scream was not prolonged. It was sharp, sudden, and cut off abruptly, as if silenced mid-breath. The nurse flinched involuntarily. The psychologist dropped his pen. Then Subject A went still. Her head slumped forward. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped to near-resting levels. For a brief moment, it appeared as though she had lost consciousness. The priest stepped closer, maintaining prayer. Without lifting her head, Subject A spoke. "You're late," she said. The priest felt a chill along his arms. Late for what? He asked. For recognition, she replied. This place was empty when we arrived. The psychologist attempted to reframe, asking her to identify herself by name, to describe where she believed she was. She lifted her head slowly. Her eyes focused on the psychologist, then passed through him, as if he were not fully present. She is tired, Subject A said. She does not want to listen anymore. The nurse confirmed that Subject A's voice had changed in tone, though not in pitch. It was flatter, more deliberate, stripped of inflection. The priest intensified the rite. He invoked dismissal, repetition, authority layered upon authority. The words were ancient, but his delivery was precise, controlled. Subject A's body began to tremble. Not violently, rhythmically. The psychologist noted that the tremor did not align with known seizure patterns. The nurse confirmed that her vitals remained stable despite the movement. Subject A's teeth chattered briefly. Then she smiled. You are asking the wrong questions, she said. You want a name. The priest did not respond. You believe that naming gives you control, she continued. That is a misunderstanding. The priest commanded her to be silent. She complied. The silence that followed was profound. The recorder captured no movement, no breathing, no ambient noise. It was as if the room itself had paused. After approximately 12 seconds, Subject A inhaled sharply. Her voice returned, softer now. You have already crossed the threshold, she said. Stopping now will not restore what was before. The nurse later stated that during this moment, she noticed something unusual. Subject A's shadow on the wall appeared doubled, slightly offset, as if cast by two light sources, though only one lamp was present. The priest continued. At 8:41 p.m., Subject A began to cry. The tears were real. Her face contorted. Her breathing hitched. She sobbed, calling out her husband's name, begging for it to stop. The psychologist stood halfway from his chair, unsure whether to intervene. The priest hesitated. This hesitation would later haunt him. He lowered his voice, addressing Subject A directly, asking if she could hear him, if she could respond. She nodded weakly. I don't want this, she whispered. Please. The nurse moved closer, checking her vitals, offering reassurance. The priest began a prayer of comfort rather than command. The change was immediate. Subject A's crying stopped abruptly. Her face went blank. She looked at the priest with something resembling disappointment. That was unwise, she said. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably. The nurse's breath became visible. The psychologist rubbed his arms, assuming stress-induced chills. The priest resumed the rite with renewed urgency. Subject A's restraint strained as her body arched slightly, then settled. You are exhausting her, she said. She will not survive repeated attempts. The priest commanded the presence to identify itself. There was a pause. Then Subject A smiled again, wider this time. I have been called many things, she said, most of them inaccurate. The priest repeated the command. Her smile faded. You may use a designation, she said slowly, if that helps you continue. The room felt smaller. The recorder captured a faint sound, like fabric tearing, though no physical damage was observed. The nurse's monitor began to beep erratically, then stabilized without intervention. The priest asked for the designation. Subject A inhaled deeply. When she spoke, her voice layered, as if overlapping itself by a fraction of a second. I am the one who remains when permission is removed, she said. The psychologist wrote this down, his hand shaking. The priest rejected the designation, commanding the presence to depart regardless of its claim. Subject A laughed softly. You misunderstand permanence, she said. This is not possession. This is residency. At 8:56 p.m., Subject A's head snapped forward. She gagged, then swallowed hard. Her voice changed again, this time unmistakably her own. I'm sorry, she whispered. I try to tell you. The priest stepped closer, speaking her name, urging her to stay present. She looked at him, eyes wide with fear. It's angry now, she said. The lights flickered. The door at the back of the room rattled once, then stopped. The nurse confirmed that the building was empty aside from those present. The priest raised his voice. Subject A screamed. This time, the scream did not stop. It rose in volume, sustained, inhuman in its endurance. The nurse clamped her hands over her ears. The psychologist backed away until he hit the wall. The recorder peaked, distorting the sound. Then, abruptly, the scream ceased. Subject A slumped forward. Her restraints went slack. For a moment, no one moved. The priest approached cautiously, calling her name. She did not respond. The nurse checked her pulse. It was present. Slow. Too slow. The psychologist looked up. The crucifix on the wall had shifted. It was no longer straight. It hung at a slight angle, as if recently touched. The priest felt a sudden, overwhelming certainty that something had changed, though he could not identify what. He resumed the prayer, quieter now, almost pleading. Subject A's eyes opened. They were calm. Too calm. You should stop, she said. The priest did not. She sighed. And then, for the first time since the rite began, she spoke a name. It was not shouted. It was not emphasized. It was spoken as one might speak a fact already known. The priest felt the word resonate physically, like pressure against his sternum. The nurse later stated that at this exact moment, every electronic device in the room shut off simultaneously. The recorder went dark. The lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Subject A's voice was still audible. You have acknowledged it, she said. The priest felt something brush past him in the dark, close enough that he could feel the displacement of air. Then the lights returned. The room was exactly as it had been, except Subject A was no longer restrained. The straps lay open on the chair. No one could explain how they had been released. Subject A stood slowly. The nurse shouted for her to sit down. She did not comply. She turned toward the priest. Her expression was no longer apologetic. It was resolved. This was never about removal, she said. It was about recognition. The priest raised the crucifix. Subject A tilted her head. You cannot force departure from a place that invited us, she said. The psychologist demanded to know who had invited them. Subject A smiled faintly. You did, she said. All of you. She took a step forward. The priest felt his legs weaken. And then Subject A collapsed. She fell hard, striking the floor. The nurse rushed to her side. Her vitals stabilized quickly. Her breathing returned to normal. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked around the room in confusion. Why are you all looking at me like that? She asked. The exorcism was terminated at 9:14 p.m. No formal declaration of success or failure was made. Subject A was transferred to a medical facility for observation. The priest remained alone in the room long after everyone else had left. He later stated that as he gathered his belongings, he noticed something written faintly on the tabletop, as if etched by pressure rather than ink. It was a single word, a word he did not recognize. But when he tried to forget it, he found he could not. And when he closed his eyes that night, he realized with sudden clarity that the name Subject A had spoken was not a name at all, but a description, and that whatever had been acknowledged in that room had not departed with her, but had instead become aware that it was no longer unobserved. The hospital admission notes described Subject A as calm, cooperative, and fully oriented. She slept through the night without incident. Her heart rate normalized. Her temperature returned to baseline. By morning, she was asking for water and inquiring about her husband, who had been kept in a separate waiting area during the procedure. When informed that the exorcism had been stopped early, she frowned. I told you not to begin, she said quietly. The attending physician attributed the events to acute dissociative stress compounded by suggestion and exhaustion. Sedatives were administered lightly, more to ensure rest than to suppress agitation. A psychiatric consult was scheduled for later that day. No one informed Subject A about the power outage. No one told her about the restraints. No one mentioned the word she had spoken. According to the nursing log, Subject A slept from 1:42 a.m. to 6:19 a.m. without waking. At 3:12 a.m., however, the hallway security camera recorded her room call light activating for precisely 4 seconds, then turning off. When the night nurse checked the room moments later, Subject A was asleep. The call button was untouched. The nurse documented it as a system error. By noon, Subject A was discharged into her husband's care with recommendations for outpatient therapy and continued observation. The attending physician noted marked improvement and expressed optimism regarding recovery. The priest was not informed of her discharge until 2 days later. In that time, he had not slept. According to his personal journal, which would later be reviewed by the diocese, he experienced recurring auditory disturbances beginning the night of the exorcism. He described hearing fragments of prayers spoken out of sequence, as if replayed incorrectly. He reported a persistent sensation of being observed, particularly during moments of silence. On the third night, he wrote only one sentence: "It is attentive now." Subject A returned home. For the first week, there were no incidents. She resumed normal routines. She cooked meals. She answered emails. She laughed at television shows. Her husband reported that she seemed more present than she had been in months. She no longer woke at 3:12 a.m. The house felt empty again. On the 8th day, she asked her husband a question while folding laundry. "Do you remember inviting anyone here?" she asked. He assumed she meant friends or family and said no. She nodded, as if confirming something. "Good," she said. "That helps." He did not ask what she meant. That night, the smoke detector activated once, then stopped. No cause was found. Subject A began attending therapy sessions as recommended. The therapist's notes describe her as articulate, introspective, and highly motivated. She spoke openly about anxiety, dissociation, and fear of losing control. She did not mention the exorcism unless prompted. During the 4th session, she paused mid-sentence and asked the therapist to close the door. When the therapist asked why, Subject A replied, "It prefers privacy." The therapist noted this as a metaphor and redirected the conversation. 2 days later, the therapist requested supervision. The school incident was the next escalation. Subject A had returned to work on a limited schedule. During a routine safety drill, the fire alarm sounded unexpectedly. While others reacted with mild irritation, Subject A froze. Witnesses reported that she turned slowly toward the sound, her face expressionless. "It remembers this," she said. A teacher asked what she meant. "The noise," Subject A replied. "It remembers being announced." She was escorted from the building and placed on administrative leave. Her husband suggested returning to the hospital. She agreed. The evaluation showed no acute distress. That night, the priest received a voicemail from an unknown number. The message was only 8 seconds long. It contained the sound of breathing. At the end, a voice spoke quietly. "You should have listened." The number could not be traced. The diocese reopened the case. The priest requested permission to visit Subject A again, this time without formal rites. The bishop approved under the condition that another cleric be present and that no spiritual interventions be attempted without further authorization. The visit took place in Subject A's living room. She greeted them politely, offering tea. Her demeanor was warm, almost relieved. "I was hoping you would come," she said. The priest asked how she had been feeling. "Better," she replied, quieter. He asked her to elaborate. "It's learned how to rest," she said. That took effort. The second cleric shifted uncomfortably. The priest asked if she felt in control. She considered the question carefully. "I feel shared," she said, "but not threatened." The priest asked if she remembered what happened during the exorcism. She nodded. "I remember warning you," she said. "I remember you not stopping." He asked about the name she had spoken. Her expression changed. "I didn't give you a name," she said. "I described a condition." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the backyard. "It doesn't want to be forced again," she continued. "It doesn't want attention." The priest asked what it wanted. "To remain unnoticed," she said, "like before." The second cleric asked before, when Subject A turned back to them. "Before you started looking," she said. The priest felt a familiar pressure in his chest. He asked if she believed it could leave. She shook her head. "This is not a matter of leaving," she said. It was never fully inside me. It is closer than that. The second cleric asked what that meant. She smiled faintly. Think of it as proximity, she said, not occupancy. The visit ended without incident. As they prepared to leave, the priest noticed something carved into the wooden frame of the doorway. It was shallow, almost imperceptible, as if made by repeated contact rather than a blade. The shape was familiar. It matched the symbol he had absent-mindedly drawn in the margin of his journal days earlier. Without remembering why, he said nothing. Over the following weeks, reports accumulated, not of subject A, but of unrelated disturbances. A parishioner complained of hearing whispered prayers in an empty chapel after hours. A maintenance worker reported finding a confessional door open repeatedly despite locking it. A seminarian experienced recurring dreams in which he was reciting prayers backward, unable to stop. Each incident was minor. Each was dismissed. Subject A's condition stabilized. She stopped attending therapy, stating she no longer felt the need. She returned to work remotely. She avoided the church, not out of fear, but, as she explained to her husband, out of courtesy. The priest attempted to pray for her privately. Each time, he felt resistance. Not pain, not fear, just the distinct sensation of being heard. One night, while reviewing his notes, he realized something that had been overlooked. During the exorcism, the presence had not resisted the prayers. It had cooperated. It had answered. It had guided. The realization made his hands tremble. He requested access to the full audio recording. The request was denied. The file had been corrupted during the power outage. Only fragments remained. One fragment, however, had survived. It was a single sentence spoken in Subject A's voice, isolated from the rest. The timestamp placed it several minutes after the exorcism had officially ended. The voice was calm, satisfied. Observation has consequences, it said. 3 months later, Subject A sent the priest a handwritten letter. There was no return address. The paper was unmarked. The handwriting was neat, unfamiliar. The letter contained only 2 sentences. It is very quiet now. Please do not begin again. The priest placed the letter in his journal and locked it away. He stopped accepting new cases. He did not explain why. Subject A and her husband eventually moved. No forwarding address was provided. According to municipal records, the house was sold 6 months later. The new owners reported no issues, no disturbances, no unexplained noises. The house was described as peaceful, too peaceful. The final entry in the diocesan file notes that the case was closed due to resolution of symptoms. No further action was recommended. The priest disagreed. Years later, during renovations to the church facility where the exorcism had taken place, workers removed the wall panel behind the chair where Subject A had been restrained. Behind it, carved deeply into the wood, was a pattern of overlapping lines. Not a symbol, not a word, a record. According to the archivist who reviewed the finding, the pattern matched markings found in other locations across the region, some predating the church itself. Each was associated with sites where rites had been performed repeatedly. Each appeared to mark not a presence, but an acknowledgement. The archivist wrote one final note in the margin. Whatever was addressed was not expelled. It was confirmed. The priest never returned to that room. Subject A was never seen again by church officials. And somewhere, in a place that does not require invitation, something that had learned the sound of prayers continued to remain exactly where it had always been. Now certain that when it spoke, someone would listen, and that the next time a warning was given, it would not need to be repeated.